welcome. My name's Anna Hall Stroud with Paul Hall and Associates Insurance, and I just wanted to thank you for joining us today as we dig deep into where to begin with farm succession planning. With me today, I have Kendall Lovejoy. Kendall, would you mind introducing yourself a bit?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anna. So glad to be here. I'm the County Agriculture and Natural Resources Educator in Fulton County, Ohio. Been in this role for the last 2 years and really found myself with a passion for farm succession planning and helping not only families in my county, but around the state and around the United States to help them walk through this process. It can be challenging, but family is most important to me, and agriculture is second. And so having these two conversations hand in hand really fill my passion, and it's something I desire to help families out with.
A good deal. We're really going to dig deep today and kind of where to begin and what are those next steps. But just like I start any of these conversations, I think it's always important to have context behind why this conversation is so important. So I'm sure that many of you have heard me give this data before, but I'm going to share it again. So just a little data on farming operations today in our country. Today, there are over 2 million family farms across our nation. That average farmer age is increasing year over year, and we're up to 58 years as that average. So I often joke that this is getting less old the older that I get, but it's also not necessarily considered, fresh. So if we look at all of those farms run by all of those farmers, roughly only a third of those family farms have a transition plan in place. So now that we have some context, let's talk a bit about why farmers, aren't taking that next step. So we know a lot of people, the farmers, they know they need a plan, but they don't know where to begin. So Kendall, talk to me a little bit about what are those first steps and how they kind of need to proceed from this. I know I need to do it, but I don't know how.
Yeah, and that's a great question that many farms are asking. And so to help kind of guide the conversation and start the doorway to farm succession planning with a farm, I really stress the importance of defining the goals and the priorities for the farm. Where do they want the farm to be? Where is the farm and where do they want the farm to be? So some of the key questions that I would ask of a family or help maybe provide a family to help them guide their thought processes. Do you want the farm to stay in the family? Several of these operations are family-based operations, and so we see that the next heirs to the farm, whether they're operating or non-operating, are family members and blood related. Though there are several farming operations that have those non-blood members who are really critical to the success of the farm and rightfully have a stake to the farm succession as it transitions out of the next generation or the senior generation. The next question I strongly encourage folks to recommend is, are your heirs considered or interested in farming? We see it more often than not that maybe the operating heir is just who we designate the farm to, but maybe they're not the one that's most positioned to take that over from maybe a business standpoint. There's some other heirs who maybe don't work on the farm every day, day in and day out, but help out when necessary. Maybe they have a desire to come back to the farm. It's just never been extended to them. And so having that tough conversation of do you want to be involved in the farm or what's your level is really critical in identifying those heirs and how the process lays out from there. And ultimately, the last question I'll leave here is what legacy do you want to leave? Several of these operations have been handed down through generations, and we look at multi-generations of family. It was built up, and it's continuing to be to this operating business that it is today. Where do you want it to go from here? You've made it successful this far or thus far. Where do you see it in 5 years, in 10 years? Where do you want your kids or that next generation, that next operator to take the operation? What legacy do you hope that they have? And that once those first really key critical questions are defined, then we can take a little bit deeper look at how we go about transitioning through and achieving those goals through that transition process.
Yes, absolutely. And a key part of that transition planning is really truly understanding what are you actually passing on? And I think that that can be a really challenging thing for people to critically think about. So, what should farmers consider when they're going through that process?
Yeah, and this is really a difficult place where we need to be honest with ourselves. But there are really few key questions that can help guide this, no matter what enterprise is on your farm or your position with that farm. Some really key questions that I think each farm should consider is where's our current financial position? And what's the viability of this farm? Where are we at? Are we laden with debt, or do the lenders own us, or are we, cash strong and ready to maybe add an enterprise or add some acreage to the farm? Does the farm generate enough income to support multiple generations? When we talk about the succession or transition planning, we talk about the transition of ownership or operatorship to that next generation. Is the farm capable of doing that from a financial standpoint and supporting two different generations, multiple generations of income streams for those families? That's important to identify, what could the farm's potential be when we look at the income potential over the next 10 to 20 years as its current enterprises sit, where could the farm go? With the varying fluctuation of markets and the current farm's assets, are we are we set up to really be successful in 10 to 20 years, or is there somewhere we need to pivot? Is maybe one enterprise dragging us down or boosting us up that we're not putting enough of our efforts? Some other key questions that I really like to ask is, what does the organizational structure look like? Who is currently making the day-to-day operational decisions for that farm? And if you want someone else to be, how are you going to transition that process? Are you setting up the heirs to take over the ownership and the management of the farm well? Asking these key questions can be really, really critical. It's also important to look at the dynamic of the relationships involved. If there's multiple parties involved or multiple heirs involved, can they get along? Or what are maybe some dividing pieces between them that they're going to need to be a workaround? Because we know that families are complex and family relationships are very dynamic at times. And when we're concerning the legacy of the family and some of the impacts that our decisions can make, it's important to understand where might we have some trouble or where may we get into some deep water that's going to need some additional help to navigate some of those questions. And then the last question I already touched on a little bit, but what involvement will non-farming heirs have in the future? Whether that is actually operating or just being a landlord, or do they just want the cash and they want to see their siblings or other heirs succeed externally from being involved financially in the operation?
Yes, absolutely. Everything you just went through, it's so, so critical. I was thinking as you were going through all of it, yes, that dad did that. Yes, dad did that. Ooh, he missed that. So, if you know where you want the operation and the family to be when you're no longer here, it really makes the rest of the process easier. And I think that's the biggest point. You have to know where you're going before the plan can come together. So, one of the biggest challenges in my mind, because it's the one I struggle to get people to take the next step on, is talking about it. So how do you start that conversation? I'd love to hear, some strategies that you provide people and really to how to have that open conversation with family and business.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we think about that, I think it's important that we set aside specific time for these conversations. This isn't something that should get brought up just around the dinner table as an ad lib conversation. Like, it needs to be somewhere where, we're gathering together for this specific purpose, making sure that there's a clear time defined and a clear purpose for the meeting when the heirs are called together and whatever involvement they may have. It's important to know that everyone's on the same page and to understand where we're talking about. But the biggest barrier to farm succession planning, I think, is having that initial conversation. And so begin talking to those family members about how we're going to go through this planning process, the desires of everyone's involvement in it, and what that may look like. What are their expectations for the conversation, and what do they want to see done throughout the process? Having those goals and priorities established from the get-go can really help see the success of the conversation as the plan unfolds. I think it's really important to find common ground between those operating and non-operating heirs as well. The perspectives are very, very different, and how they perceive the farm and the assets within can be extremely different. The valuation of the equipment, just for example, the one that's operating, who's wrenched on it and worked on it for years, has a lot more value to it or understands the market value of that far better than maybe the non-operating heir as well. And so how do we establish common ground and help generate clear understanding of the process and what that looks like? And ultimately, just really, I want to emphasize how important clear communication is through this whole process. in order to avoid conflict and avoid any hard decisions or harder conversations than need to be, making sure that everyone's clear, open, honest, and upfront from the get-go is going to help the success of this process as the plan unfolds.
Yes, absolutely. And I just don't think we can emphasize it enough. So I'm going to say it again. Clear communication is truly one of the most important pieces of this planning process. And sometimes that means you have to have those hard conversations. Nobody wants to have the hard conversations, but trust me when I say that it's better heard straight from the horse's mouth than found in a piece of paper after death. So have the hard conversations, make sure you're clearly communicating with every person involved, whether it's someone that's going to be involved in the operation after or not. Sitting around that table and having that conversation about what the future looks like for the family and the farming operation, that's what's important. And if you have clear communication from the top, the rest of the family meetings are much, much smoother based on experience. So thank you for all of that breakdown for us. It was very helpful. So once families start the discussion and they've started that clear communication we keep talking about, they also are more than not realizing in some of those family meetings that they need professional guidance. So who do they turn to when they get to that part?
Yeah, and it's important that our families establish or the farm establishes their team. Who's got your back through this process? Because there are a lot of complexities to it. And so there's really probably four key people that I want to see each farm have on their what I call their board of advisors. These are the folks that need to be aware of the decisions that are being made on the farm and are going to help you make those decisions. Estate planning attorney is going to be really critical for walking through the legal documentation for asset transfer and business transfer, looking at different wills and trusts and those different legal structures that are in place for these specific processes. Having someone who's very, very understanding of that estate planning process is going to be critical. And the background in agriculture is really beneficial for these people as well. There's a lot of attorneys out there who can write up a will, no problem, but having the background and understanding of agriculture is critical. And finding an agricultural-based attorney is becoming few and far between. And so finding that key specialization is pretty critical to the success of this role. Not doable without, not that it's not doable without, but can be a key component of this team. Someone else I'd like to see involved in the process is a financial planner. Farms are really complex and they are businesses, farm businesses. And so having somebody who's very knowledgeable with the farm's finances, whether it's the lender or someone external to the organization, to really assess the farm's financial health. Where do they stand today and where will their current position, what's their trajectory based off of their current financial position? Think it's also really important to have someone knowledgeable on insurance. Your insurance agent is going to be really critical in helping value the assets and making sure that all the assets are being covered through the asset transfer process and documentation. A lot of times we forget about that trailer that's out back or something that we haven't denoted in the asset filing or in our balance sheet that maybe is not being covered or taken care of. And so beyond that, there's so much more opportunity for the insurance expert to be on the team as well. Last person that maybe I'd be really critical on the board of advisors is just having a farm management consultant, having to help understand that business succession plan. And so whether it's a extension agent, whether it's an attorney, whether it's your agronomist, I think all of these are really key folks that should all be on there. But who are those people who help you be successful in your farm business? Maybe they're even external to agriculture and it's just someone you rely on as a source of wisdom for life's decisions, right? All these are really key folks, but from a professional standpoint, we really want to see the attorney, the financial planner, an insurance expert, and maybe some other sort of wisdom really fulfilling this process and supporting you along the way.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned specifically on the attorney, but I think it's also important to have both your financial planner and your insurance expert be true experts and professionals in agriculture as well. Because there's a lot of financial planners out there. There's a lot of insurance agencies out there. But there are also much fewer of those in the agricultural world, just like there are attorneys these days. And it's important that they understand really, truly what you're trying to protect so that they can look at your operation in a much different aspect. Farms are businesses, and sometimes we forget that, but we also need somebody that understands a farm as a business. It's not just any business. So my only takeaway from those notes, a great breakdown of your team. I love it. So let's say we finally got somebody excited who's listening today that wants to get started. What's the first thing they should do?
Well, there's several different steps, so I'm going to give four here. But really, I think in summary, we want to outline the farm transition goals. Where do we want the farm to be, and how do we want to get it there? And then it's really having that conversation with the family member would be step two of the process. Scheduling that first conversation that, hey, we're getting the family together, or we're getting the heirs together, or who we presume to be the heirs together, to have this conversation on what our farm succession plan looks like, whether there's something currently already established or something needs to be established, having that initial family meeting around this topic. And I would strongly encourage you to make it a recurring family meeting. You're not going to get it tackled all in one day. But having the conversation and opening the doorway to that is really going to be a critical step in the right direction for this process. Other suggestion that I would make is that you consult with your trusted advisor or trusted advisors, as we just listed, that team of folks who are going to be supporting you along this process. Consulting with each of them, getting their input, and maybe they have suggestions for other folks who need to be involved with the process as well. That can be a really beneficial conversation and one that should take place as this plan starts to develop. And then the last thing I really strongly encourage all farms need to do, but especially farms that are beginning this process, is that they needed to have a clear understanding of where they're at, both financially and legally. And so going through the records and the legal documentation that's already in place and having a sound foundation for where the farm sits today is going to help them really figure out where they should go from here in terms of different structures, whether it's the will or the trust, and just how the process will lay out from here.
I think those are four great practical steps for people to start with. And, just to summarize kind of what we've talked about here is, some of your key takeaways need to be: develop your goals and priorities for the future, develop those solutions on how you're going to get there, and then communicate that plan clearly with everyone involved so that you can make it official with your team of advisors. And then most importantly, I think remember that procrastination can put the farm's future at risk. That's not me trying to put pressure on you, but at the same time, don't wait. My father went into surgery to remove a tumor thinking we'd have time to fight the cancer and have time to do all the things we needed to do. And he came out unable to ever talk again. And he joined Jesus just 5 days later. So we're not promised tomorrow. I typically like to put a picture up now that has, the sun setting over a pretty field, because I like to say, don't let the sun go down one more day before you start thinking through and taking action on a succession plan. It really is that important. So don't wait and don't procrastinate.
Absolutely. And it's important to note now that this isn't going to be a 1 day process or a 1 month process. A really good farm succession plan can take at the least amount of time, 6 to 12 months to really develop. And for plan to be laid out, it could take 5 to 10 years. And as long as those heirs are living and still interested in the operation, this should be a continual process through the duration of the legacy of the farm, the lifespan of the farm. It's not a one and done type of event. And so I appreciate that. Don't wait. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And so the best time to start is today for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Could you share real quick where farmers can access some resources that you utilize a lot?
Yeah, so through Extension, we're really blessed to have a lot of great team of folks who are pouring resources out there available to you at the public for no cost. Through our farm office website is probably the quickest way to find them. If you visit your county extension office, you're also going to get connected with professionals such as myself, who's able to connect you with those resources and maybe potentially walk alongside you with this process if it's so desired. We have some great state level folks, Robert Moore and David Marison, who are also be willing to walk alongside you and help you through these processes. If a county-based educator is maybe not your preference or someone you prefer to have so close to the farm, but these folks are really here for your benefit and to help you succeed along this process as well and accessing those resources. Best website to go to is farmoffice.osu.edu. Under the Farm Transition tab, you'll find all kinds of great resources available at your disposal. And if you have any trouble finding those, feel free to reach out. I'm glad to point you in the right direction.
Yes, thank you. And then, of course, Nationwide Insurance also has the Land is Your Legacy program. They started, I don't know, 20 years ago at this point. And it's got a whole team dedicated to helping farmers work through this process. So if you're just at a loss of, I really don't know where to start and I just need somebody to take it by the horns and tell me what to do, we've got some information we would be happy to share with their team so that you can kind of take that next step. And I'm going to leave you with encouraging you to take that first step today, like right now. I like to always say, like, what do you have to lose? Accept everything. And that really kind of just puts a true meaning behind how important this is. So, Kendall, thank you so much for walking through this incredibly important topic today. Your insights have been invaluable.
Thanks so much for having me.